everybody. I'm now standing between you and lunch, not my favorite position. If you'll permit me, I would love to just start by reading you a story. Not my own. This is by a woman named Alicia. I hadn't lived at home since I was 17. After going to college in bustling New York City, I lived in the Northeast for a total of 26 years. I crafted a comfortable life with a job I enjoyed, friends with whom I loved spending time, and I gave birth to a daughter who is my twin flame. I kept in touch with my maternal grandmother and my father back home, as I was very close emotionally to both of them. So I visited home from time to time, but these visits were few and far between as I was fully immersed in my life and in raising my daughter. I could not have been happier until I wasn't. I had a nagging feeling that despite all the bells and whistles in my life, I needed to move back home. The vision that kept presenting itself to me was one of a window closing. I knew that if I didn't stop and move right then, something would happen that I would regret for the rest of my life. This epiphany was very disturbing to me, and it shook me to my core. I'm a consummate list maker and deliberator, but still I had this nagging feeling that I couldn't shake, and I knew I had to move. So I did. I left my job, my friends, my life, and I moved back home. It was not an easy transition. However, time would show me that this was in fact the only decision I could have made, as my father needed significant medical attention, and voila, I was there to support him. For 10 years, I enjoyed my family and my hometown, and I spent a lot of time with them. I also realized how much time I had missed, how much they had to do without me. Simple things like going to the grocery store or organizing doctor's visits. Both my grandmother and my father are extremely independent elders, and yet they didn't ask for anything. However, I felt completely guilty for not having visited more, for not getting all the hugs that I could, for not sitting with them outside and enjoying breezes. How many breezes had I missed anyways? In 2022, both my grandmother and my father became seriously ill at the same time. They were in 2 different hospitals, and in my anxiety, my sadness, and gratitude, I was determined to support both of them. I left my job. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. My soul was crying out to me, and I knew that I had to give my undivided attention to my family. I made the decision to do so without guilt regarding my professional position, career goals, or standing in my community. This was the best and the absolute hardest decision in life change that I've made thus far in my 55 years. It's not been an easy road, far from it. My life looks very different now. Rather than hanging out with friends, you can find me on the sofa watching action movies with my dad. Rather than working as a professional with a slam dunk retirement package, I started teaching writing and science classes. Amid doctor's visits, medicine distribution, and general mood lifting for my dad, I had to think deeply about what I needed to do to protect my peace and soothe my own soul while I care for my father through his multiple health issues. Interestingly, after apprenticing with a beekeeper friend, my dad encouraged me to get my own hives. Thus, I became a beekeeper. I find the moments in the hives, communing with the bees, talking to them, and vibrating with them at middle C does the trick. It gives me the reprieve necessary to support my dad and myself as we both come face to face with the notion of death while still embracing life. Life and death are present each day as I immerse myself in the natural world, and I learn to take the good with the not so good. I try to keep vibrating as the bees do, to keep my soul in harmony and my mind clear. I'm not shoulder to the wheel pushing through the next thing as I used to be. Rather, I'm embracing, feeling, and practicing immense gratitude as I attempt to vibrate like the bees in middle C. What a story. Can anyone resonate with any of the themes in Alicia's story? Sacrifice, ambition, love, loss, grief, rebirth. This is just one story of over 50 that I collected as part of an ethnographic exploration I did last year on modern midlife womanhood. This is part of my role as head of listening at an early stage venture capital firm based on backing entrepreneurs who are consumer obsessed and trying to make real change for audiences we're passionate about. And midlife women, we roughly 37 to 62, was an audience that we spent the last half year really getting to know and understand. Looking to unpack what it means to be, to stay, and to truly feel well in midlife. You can pick up in your goodie bag a copy of Mindsets from the Middle, which is the report I wrote about these stories that I collected. It's a synthesis of what we heard and learned through the stories about this life stage and why this life stage is so complicated. I started by trying to explore the health and wellness category for this audience. I kind of expected that my research would result in a tidy picture of what wellness means for women in midlife. We could talk yoga and supplements and pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals. But when I invited women to truly tell their story in their own way, in their own words, and without interruption, I got a very different view into what it means to be well and feel well in midlife. And it totally transformed our investment thesis on backing women who are in this life stage and on entrepreneurs that are looking to serve this audience. I want to share with you just one insight that came out of that work, but I will quickly flash up the kind of 4 big ideas that came in it, and I invite you to read it and find me, and we can chat about it, or find me on LinkedIn. I love to chat more about what I learned. The one I want to talk about is a phenomenon that I saw over and over again in the stories of midlife women, and that is a story of self-treatment. This is a woman's tendency to do just about everything that is in her control, to hack, to make do, to build a patchwork system of support to get through before seeking out alternative solutions. I'm seeing some smiles. Raise your hand if you resonate with the idea of self-treatment, or if self-treatment is something that you do in your day-to-day life. Okay, we'll work on it. Melody Roberts, who is the co-founder and CEO of a brand called Live Labs, which is an incontinence brand, I think summarized self-treatment beautifully. And I'm going to turn around so I can read the quote. She says, for most women, discovering that you're leaking is unfortunate, and it leads to avoiding things that make you leak. That's self-treatment. People say, I never get on a trampoline or go for a jog. I don't even go to a comedy club. Or they think, I only leak when I work out, so I'll do that in the basement of my home, in dark leggings. I heard that multiple times. And in our exploration of self-treatment, I spoke with both midlife women, founders building for midlife women, and experts in midlife women. And I learned that we have 5 key drivers that are actually causing our tendency to self-treat. The first I want to talk about is the biggest, which we've already alluded to here. We majorly lack credible clinical research on women's minds and bodies. It was not until 1993 that women were even required to participate in clinical studies in the US. And that followed a nearly 20-year period of time where women of childbearing age, which by the way is quite a wide array of our life, were banned from participating in clinical studies. So we, in fact, do not know a lot about the woman's mind and body, and it shows. As Samantha Ski, who's the president of She Media, told me, she said, it's only been a couple decades that women's bodies have even been studied. It's always been assumed that women's bodies will behave like smaller-bodied men. That is what we are using as our reference point. So we have a lot of catching up to do, and there is some momentum in the space that is quite exciting. What this has led to, and I'm sure many of us in this room can relate to this, is that providers really are not trained or incentivized to truly handle all of the things that happen in midlife. Of course, including perimenopause and menopause, but there's a lot of other health conditions that come with women in this life stage. There's a study done in 2019 of medical residents across a couple of different disciplines. And these medical residents, more than 20% of them reported never having had a single lecture on menopause in their time in med school. And less than 7% of them said they felt comfortable and adequately prepared to even counsel a woman in perimenopause or menopause. Problematic. Understandable maybe against the backdrop of the dearth of research we have. The third reason why we saw women maybe uniquely positioned to self-treat is that also as a result of this, that womanhood, I kept hearing over and over again, women were talking about womanhood like it was an oral tradition passed down through the women before us. Our conceptions and notions of what it means to even be a woman and what we should expect in return for that comes from our aunts and our moms and our grandmothers and the women we see in society. That can be really powerful. Story, as my whole career shows, story is super powerful. But as Megan Doyle, who's the CEO and co-founder of Cardam Health, shared, anecdotal evidence alone is extremely problematic because we don't know how common something is, but those stories are really powerful. So we rely on anecdotal evidence to figure out how we should continue to get by. The fourth reason we saw driving self-treatment is really that pain and suffering are seen as a very natural part of the woman's existence. There was a fantastic article I hope that many of you read in the New York Times Magazine by Susan Dominus on menopause. If you have not read it, I highly encourage you do. And what she said, she quoted Rebecca Thurston, who's a doctor who's known, very educated on menopause, when she talked about how we have a high cultural tolerance for women's suffering. It does not matter to us that women suffer. All of us come into our periods or fertility journey or pregnancy or postpartum or perimenopause or menopause or heart disease or cancer with the assumption that to be a woman is to be in pain. That's problematic. I'm so sorry I went above the green line. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so sorry, camera. Okay, the fifth reason why women are self-treating, as we heard. This is important. The physiological transformations that happen in midlife, again, from fertility through pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and menopause, there's a lot going on in the body at the time. And it makes it very hard to attribute what is truly due to womanhood, due to perimenopause. We know the average age of menopause in the US is 51. But as I hope everyone in this room knows, menopause is one day, a year after your final period. It's the 8 to 10 years leading up to menopause that is perimenopause, when your estrogen levels are ebbing and flowing and changing, and you are a spectrum of over 35, I think now we're up to 45 different potential symptoms related to perimenopause, and they're changing every day. That is the period of time when things feel very confusing and very hard to attribute to what's happening in your body. So it makes it harder, and what do? We self-treat as a result. So against this backdrop of self-treatment, as a consumer investor, my question is, well, what can we do to actually promote real and sustained behavior change, knowing that there is this tendency to self-treat? And that's the question I've been sitting with, really for the last 6 months. Actually, before I do that, there's a fantastic story, a quote here I just want to share from Shannon Field, who's the CEO and founder of Sochi. She told me perimenopausal women wake up at 3 a.m. with cortisol raging through their bodies, and we think, I must be stressed. There's a lot of reasons I could be stressed. We think, I have a lot on my mind. But she says it's a chicken and an egg problem. The reason why we're waking up is not because we're stressed and not because we're poorly coping with our lives, it's because we have cortisol raging through our bodies. So it actually makes physical sense why we're having this reaction, and it makes it really, really hard to attribute that, our lives and what's happening in our lives, to that because of the real how much these symptoms show up in our day-to-days. So now I'm going to go back. The question on my mind is, how do we unlock real behavior change up against this backdrop? And one of the questions I had in my mind is, okay, well, let's talk about it more. I love that menopause, the word menopause, has already been dropped. I just did it 15 times, but it was already dropped before I got up here today. Yeah. Talking about it is incredible. And I wondered if talking about it and normalizing these topics is enough to really, truly change behavior. What I maybe expected to see was a direct linear correlation between normalization, so how normal or acceptable something is in society, and how motivated women are to change their behavior. This was, unfortunately, as complex as women are, this was not what I found. What I saw in research was really a U-curve, which is what you see on the right here, which I think I'm standing in front of and you might not be able to see, but check the report, where as a topic, starting out when a topic is not normalized, we're not talking about it. I'll use urinary incontinence for a second. When we don't talk about things that a lot of people experience, it's actually very motivating. But we only are motivated by shame. So that's really not a sustainable or positive change, but we are willing to act. As we move down the normalization curve and we start to talk about subjects that maybe are taboo, I actually saw women's motivation wane, fall into what I call a trough of acceptance. Because unfortunately, normalcy is very demotivating. When something's wrong with you, you go to Google and you say, is this normal? And when you find out that it is, you stop looking. This is what we call the normal common trap, which is the belief that we conflate that something is common, as in happens and exists for a lot of people, and that we assume that it is therefore normal. And so we don't have to do anything about it. This has led to a lot of women caught in the trough of acceptance, I think, as it comes to women's health, especially in this life stage. But I think the power is if we continue to normalize the subject, so that we're not just normalizing having a symptom or having a problem, but we're normalizing doing something about it, we can move back up beyond the trough of acceptance to a real place of behavior change rooted in empowerment. And that is what I see a lot of, I think, women's health brands now doing, but it is a lot of work to get down that normalization curve out of that trough of acceptance from just saying it's normal to leak when you laugh, or it's normal to leak when you sneeze, which if I ask this room, who here leaks a little bit when they sneeze or laugh, I won't ask you to raise your hands. But I imagine it's a lot of women in this room do. When we actually say, okay, now what do we do about it? How do we make real change? And so my call as a brand and consumer-obsessed investor is how do we move people up that change curve? And that's the work of a lot of great consumer brands in this space. The thing that I will end with, and then I want to leave some space for question and answer. We have about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more, depending on what they allow me. Dan promised more. No, I'm just kidding. Is that changing the narrative alone? Thank you. Changing the narrative alone does not make the change, but it's a really important first step. And so how do we get past normalizing that we are dealing with something to actually normalizing seeking out treatment and getting what we need from it? So with that, I will leave the floor open for questions, for stories and experiences that you all have had. If any of this has resonated with you, or if you have any questions about the work that we did as part of our work at Listen, let me know. Thank you. And you can find the report in your gift bag, so please pick it up.
So yeah, this is a Q&A portion of the session, so feel free to raise your hand, share, ask.
Eva had told me I was supposed to say that before I started so that you were all able to think about your questions, but I failed to do that, and I apologize. Karen. Kick us off.
I have a question. I actually really just wanted to say thank you. The trough of acceptance, that hit home. That was a deep cut, dude. Mm-hmm. Because like for anything, you just said it. I don't need to re-say it. So thank you. I don't really have a question. That doesn't mean I don't think about these things, but I don't have a question. I just
thank you.
Want to say thank you.
I appreciate that.
That's it, guys.
Gratitude is
I see one over there. Everyone will get it too.
Hi, my name is Kristen Leone. I work at Google. Thank you also. This is so important. It boggles my mind that we hadn't been including women in research since '93. This is that, unfortunately, I had known ahead of time. I'm wondering if you could talk about two different things. What are the kinds of companies that you're investing in, like in your fund? And then are you seeing more research being done, particularly around like changing hormonal levels, and how do women like us get more access to that or know what to really ask for to better understand all the different kinds of things going on?
Awesome questions. Thanks, Kristen. I'll take the first, which is our personal investment thesis. So at Listen, we invest in early stage companies. So I'm a seed and Series A investor. We invest in consumer only. So that can be across consumer tech, consumer health, consumer wellness. We've invested in everything from, we have a Dame Products, which is a sexual wellness and vibrator company, all the way to cannabis brand called This Grass. We have tools, a brand in our portfolio, which actually I think you should have in your goodie bag as well, called Slumberkins, which is also a tool for midlife women who are looking to raise children and need help with the social emotional learning side of it. So we invest in everything across consumer. Where we're really convicted in this space is for brands that are really serving this woman. Now, I would also say that we've already heard the statistic today too, that women, especially midlife women, drive the vast majority of purchasing decisions. So it's my point of view that there is no consumer brand that shouldn't be centering this audience and can't learn from centering her. The way we see this market, our market map, is actually really what kind of zoomed out of just the woman's brain and body. We heard loud and clear that to reduce her to the sum of her biological parts is way too reductive. So our investment thesis on women's health not only includes the health of the woman herself, but all of the people in her orbit that she is also promoting the health for. That is her aging spouse, that could be her parents, that could be her children. So one of our investments made shortly after this work was completed was in a brand called Modern Pediatrics, which is an in-home pediatrics business. They come to your home. You might ask, why is that a women's health brand? Based on what we heard in this research, that is absolutely a women's health brand because it is supporting the woman who is still the person primarily responsible for supporting the health of the children in her home. So we see a pretty broad view, Kristen, to your question about what we invest in. We have a really broad view into what it means to support women and truly being and feeling healthy in midlife. The second question, was around research. Thank you for asking that. There is a really exciting wave of interest and investment in women's health research. I'm not the first person to become really passionate about the gap that we have. The Biden White House actually just launched a fairly major commitment to supporting and continuing to advance women's health research. Probably a lot of people in this room are either tangentially related to that or directly related to pushing that forward. Very exciting, and has had a lot, I think, of byproduct effect as a result of that. I will say that in 2001, 2002, there was a White House initiative called the Women's Health Initiative put forward to try to do research on the top killers of women. And unfortunately, there was a particular study related to hormones as part of that research, specifically related to menopause, that was totally misdone and then unfortunately misinterpreted, and led to a very long period of time where women did not have easy access to hormone replacement therapy or to estrogen, which there was a belief that it directly correlated to high cancer rates. There were a lot of problems with the research, including the body of women who, thank you, I see it, are we okay? Including the body of women they used as subjects in that study, much older and really had other underlying health problems, so it overstated the risk of hormone replacement therapy. So we're coming out of, there's been a lot of research done debunking that research and trying to create more research that shows the healthy effects of potentially using hormone replacement therapy for people for whom it's a good tool. But yeah, lots of research coming out and a lot of really wonderful brands that are helping to spur that on and building demand for it. If we have time, we have a question back left.
I just wanted to mention, you had mentioned hormonal therapy. The research, as I understand, is an old research, but now they've come back and looked at it in light of everything that's going on now. So it's good. So are you investing in any companies that are looking at hormonal?
We have met most companies that are investing in women's hormone replacement therapy, and I'm a huge champion for them. We have not yet invested in a menopause-specific brand. But there are lots out there, including, I think, somebody today coming from Geneva. Okay, we're good? On 10. Amazing. Thank you so much.